got a lot of guys here that some of them were a little bit surprised, me and Tristan, before we started the podcast, looking some of the names that were on this list. But a lot of guys here that Tristan, some of them the Browns want to bring back, some guys that are going to test the market, and we'll go from there. But why don't you take us through the Browns free agency and what we think of them here?
Yeah, so when we're looking at Browns players that are potentially hitting the open market, we want to focus on predominantly the guys that played the most amount of snaps and see about are they returning, right? That's the big thing. And the thing I'll have that'll give a lot of people comfort is the amount of players that are hitting Browns free agency that were like definitive starters that have played over 50% of the snaps. Only two guys, Za'Darius and Sione. Those are the only two that have played over 50 that were big time actual starters for us. So take a deep breath. We're not completely screwed. We're not losing like a complete side of the ball. That's not the case. But at the same token, there are some big names here that we want to talk about. So I said him to start it off. Let's talk about him. Za'Darius Smith. I believe it was Mary Kay who reported that I think it was like just a few hours ago that Za'Darius would hit the open market, but the Browns were likely going to be able to retain him. And if not, they had other options on the open market that they liked. So, Derek, Za'Darius Smith, what are your thoughts? What do you think the Browns should look to do when it comes to Za'Darius Smith?
Yeah, so what you're talking about there, Mary Kay said the team would like Za'Darius Smith back, but they will let the market decide his price first. So, when teams do that, I guess you could say it's a tad risky, but at the same time, it's smart because it's like, hey, if the player is willing to come back, and you say, okay, hey, go check the market, see if you can be worth, what your ceiling of worth is to a team, and then hey, we'll come back to you with what we can do. It's smart. It's risky with some guys, but for somebody like Za'Darius Smith, Tristan, like I think for the Browns, I feel like we're fine either way. And I know that's kind of a little bit controversial with some people, but like I think Za'Darius Smith is great. I was like legitimately unbelievably shocked when we traded for Za'Darius Smith. I don't know if you remember that day. I remember
It
I
was bliss.
yes.
Bliss.
I went to Target and I picked up Chewy's cuz my fat ass wanted some food and it was raining. I got home, pulled into my driveway, pulled out my phone, saw the Browns traded for Za'Darius Smith, and I was like there's just no way. Like we got Za'Darius Smith. And to the point of what he is worth, I think he had a good year. Like I think he was really good. And he certainly had his moments where he was great. But at the same time, I don't believe the market for him is going to be insane. Like I think he's a guy that on the open market, he's not your number one, right? This is not a guy that you bring in to be your number one pass rusher anymore. I think he has the capability, but I don't think on the open market, I don't think teams are going to look at it like that. So, for the Browns, um, you know, would you do me a favor? Pull up Za'Darius Smith's age for me because I can't remember how old he is.
Yeah, I've got him. I've got everything right here. Like it was gonna feed into my argument
Oh,
too.
okay.
The guy's 32.
Okay. Oh,
So,
okay. Ooh.
he's a 32-year-old edge who last year, let's see, where is it? Sacks. He had 5.5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 20 QB hits, which was good. But, um, are people going to be paying that guy a monstrous amount? Like, I do not expect Za'Darius to get. I'd be shocked if he got $10 million or more. I'm expecting him to fall between 6 and 8 mil.
Yeah.
That's what I would expect.
Yeah, that number sounds about right. And For me, Tristan, at least for me, I don't know about everybody else. My opinion on Zedarius is like, hey, I would love to have him back. I would love to have Z back for another year, but at the same time, I'm not shedding any tears if he's not. And the reason I say that is because I think the Browns have more than what we realize at the edge position. I think Alex Wright is good. He's shown flashes last year that he was becoming something really good at times. I don't want to stunt his development. I don't want to give Zadarius Smith a 2 or 3 year extension. If we bring him back, I'd bring him back for a year. Continue kind of what we did this past season towards the back half of kind of a rotation there. I really like Isaiah McGuire. I was really high on him coming out of the draft. I know we didn't see anything out of him this past season, but I am still very high on him. I still think he can be really good. And then Isaiah Thomas. I know he was, on the practice squad at one point, and he's not looked
Yeah.
at as a high, uh, you know, not prospect. That's not the right word, but like a high ceiling kind of guy. Like I know some people don't look at him as like, hey, he could be the opposite. But in terms of depth and rotation between Alex Wright, Isaiah McGuire, and Isaiah Thomas, I think we're fine. I think we are absolutely fine as far as the defensive end position. But I would not be upset continuing the development. And what I mean by that is like, if you say, hey, uh, Zadarius Smith can come back on a 1 year extension for 6 mil, X amount of it guaranteed, not everything. I would do it because then you can continue that rotation and development for those younger guys. If you don't do that, then you're saying, okay, Alex Wright, you're the guy. And I have no problem with that. If that ends up being the situation, I'm fine. Like, I'm not nervous. I'm excited.
Well,
I'm
it's
excited.
not only is it just Alex Wright, but it's also Obo. Obo looked
Yes,
great
thank you.
last year.
I totally forgot
Um,
about Obo.
yeah, honestly, like we've got a lot of promising edges. Like I don't think, and this is where I'm with you. I agree with the approach that the Browns are taking with Zedarius because there's no point in because over the cap has his free agency valuation at a little over 9.1 mil. Uh,
Mm,
so like when we look at it like that, right? A $9 million player, right? Um, if it's on a 1 year deal to do 9.1 mil, would you be comfortable doing it? I could be. You could sell me on it. Um, however, at the same token, it's still kind of a risk. Like we got to remember, this isn't necessarily um it, with Zedarius, right? Like he filled a great role for us last year, and I agree with you. I think he was very good for us, and I would go as far as to say he was very undervalued for what he brought
mm-hmm.
because he wasn't getting the sack numbers.
Yeah.
Um, but
A
his
lot of
pressures, his
pressures.
QB hits, um, he brought value. He did. Um, so would I love to bring him back? Absolutely. I think it makes a lot of sense to try and bring him back. However, at the same token, like I don't think that we should be overpaying to bring him back because we've got
Exactly.
enough there. We
Mm,
got enough there. I
yeah.
feel comfortable with, but it's an added bonus if you can.
Hmm. It's kind of like it's not apples to apples, but it's almost like Tyler Boyd for the Bengals. Like they're fine at receiver. They got receivers. They don't need to bring him back, but if
Yeah,
they have a cheap option, like if he says, "I'll take a cheap deal to come back here. I like Joe Burrow, whatever." Like that would be okay. That'd be understandable. It's kind of the same thing here. Like, hey, you have your number one in Miles Garrett, defensive player of the year, one of the best, arguably the best pass rusher in the NFL, defensive end in the NFL. And then you still have Okoronkwo, who was a speed demon on the edge, who was incredible. I think, honestly, bringing in Zedarius was the best thing for Obo because that kind of forced him to be like, I got to find a way to make an impact. And he did. So between Obo, Alex Wright, Isaiah McGuire, and Isaiah Thomas, if those are your four options outside of Miles, I'm completely okay with that. Like Obo would be your starter. Alex Wright would come in probably on like rundowns, um, in certain situations. And then, like we're fine. That my entire point here is like, listen, we don't need we don't need Zedarius to come back if it's cheap and it's a luxury thing. Sure, we'll take him back. But at his age, the money that he could get, you don't want to pay. If he'll take a cheap deal, sure, and then go from there. I think that makes the most sense. So
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And um, a lot of what Zadarius Smith did, I'm gonna finish on this, and then I'll kind of move on. A lot of what Zadarius Smith did do, that went unnoticed was in the run game. I
mm-hmm.
thought he was a good presence in the run game, and we kind of had him doing a lot of the dirty work, and then on those pure pass rush downs, like guys like Obo would get in
Mm-hmm.
and would just tear it up, and they would get the
Yep.
sacks, right? So you know people are gonna say like, like how good is Darius Smith? What is he worth paying a lot of money? I think he could be. For us right now with where we're at with our cap, it's just a question of does it make enough sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because PFF had him graded at an 82.6, which is a good rating. And while PFF isn't like lower, it's a good indication, especially when you talk about linemen,
Mm-hmm.
because it's easier to determine how good a lineman is through analytics because it's clear if they won or lost on the line of scrimmage. Versus guys in the secondary, it's like, well, we assume that he's covering this.
Yeah.
So, um,
The only
something to
last
think about.
thing I want to throw in here before we move on to our next guy, um, Tristan, I just want to know if you feel the same way. I feel like bringing Zadarius Smith, there's a little bit of a risk of stunting the growth of some of your young guys because for me, especially Alex Wright, when we drafted Alex Wright, he was a raw prospect with unbelievable God-given athleticism. Small school kid, and we both were very high on him. And he's starting to pop off. I am a bit worried if you do bring Zadarius Smith back and start kind of limiting his reps a little bit because of that. Could hinder a little bit.
Um, yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. Um, the thing I'm looking at when I see it from that perspective is, yes, it would technically give uh, Alex Wright less opportunities, Obo Okoronkwo less opportunities, Isaiah McGuire, Isaiah Thomas, like those guys would get less opportunities with Zadarius Smith coming back. But I think with where we're at as a team right now, it's less so about giving guys opportunities to grow and develop, and more so about doing what's best for the team and winning, getting in a position where you feel like you have a good chance to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
That's where we're at right now. And if bringing back Zadarius makes the D line perform as it did last year, and we can also get guys developing, because the other thing to remember is nobody stays healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody stays healthy the full 18-week season. Or was it 17 weeks? I don't know.
17
But
weeks. Yep.
yeah, but nobody stays healthy the whole time. It just doesn't happen. And when you put that into perspective, right, you know, we need to get as much depth as we can. And the key is, if you're not going to bring back as Darius Smith, it's because you're investing bigger money in a different area on your roster that you feel needs it.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you don't bring back Zadarius, but you hit in land a big name free agent wide receiver, and you're able to bring in a depth guy for your D line, and you trust between Obo, Alex Wright, Isaiah McGuire, Isaiah Thomas, and whoever you bring in free agency, that they'll be able to do the job across from Miles, then you're living, you're gold, you're fine. Um, Again, it just depends on what's the trade off. What's it gonna be? Because there has to be a good balance between the guys that we bring in, uh, the guys we bring back, and making sure that you have enough depth.
Hmm.
That's honestly like that's possibly even more important than the starting lineup, than the starters, because you know that at least a few starters are going to be out multiple games. You
Hmm.
know it. So we'll see. I'm excited to see where this offseason takes us. But um, that's all I've got on Zedarius. Derek, you ready to move on?
Yep.
All right. So we're going to continue on the defensive line, and we're going to talk about uh, Shelby Harris. So Shelby Harris is an interesting one for me because with him, he's 33 years old. When he played for us this past season, played well and filled a role and was very very good in his role. Um, and he's a guy that I trust. However, we're going to be talking about a couple of other defensive linemen that are younger uh, and perform just as good. So Shelby, it's confusing with me. It's hard for me because it's like I love his attitude, I love his mentality, I love how he played. It's just one of those things where I'm not sold that there's gonna be a spot for him, that there's gonna be a carved out role for him that there was this year. So because D tackle we invested a lot last off season, and like hell, even Siaki Ika is gonna have to get reps this year.
Hmm.
So like man, I think that Andrew Barry has got a tough task on his hands,
Hmm.
figuring out what he's doing with this D tackle group, and we'll talk about the other options for bringing him back. But Derek, when you look at Shelby Harris, when you look at the production that he had last season, do you believe that it makes sense for us to bring Shelby Harris back?
Yeah, I. It's hard. It's hard to talk about Shelby without grouping some guys. So I'm sorry. I'm gonna jump the gun a little bit.
That's fine.
Um, for me, there's three guys. There's Jordan Elliott. There's Shelby Harris. There's Mo Hurst. It's all I can think of. I believe that's it. Um, for me, I think you should do your best to keep at least two of those guys. For me, I think it's more likely than not Jordan Elliott would be gone. I know a lot of Browns fans don't like him and aren't really big fans of him, but at his age and what he put on field last year, Jordan Elliott had a really good year. Under the radar, really good year. And being a young defensive tackle in the NFL, having the year that he did, he's going to garner some money. Like he's going to get I'm not saying crazy, but more of a contract than I believe the Browns would be willing to pay. For sure, in my opinion. So I think it's more likely than not that Jordan Elliott's gone. So with that being said, for me, I would re-sign both of them. I'd re-sign Mo Hurst. I'd re-sign Shelby Harris. But the difference is, I would give Mo Hurst a 2 to 3 year extension. I don't think that's crazy to think that he could get a multi-year deal. And we'll talk about this down the line with some of these other guys on this list. But I think Mo Hurst is somebody that you need to invest in as a possible long-term defensive tackle number three. I think that makes sense. I think he could do it cheap. I think he makes a lot of sense. Now Shelby Harris, I think give it another year if he's willing to come back cheap. I'd let him test the market. He's a guy that I'd say, hey, go see what you can be worth. That's fine. Um, but if he's not getting anything that blows him away, I'd be like, hey, you want to come back? Sure. Because you look at the defensive tackle room, Dalvin Tomlinson is obviously your number one. That's a given. You drafted Siaki Ika last year. You're going to expect something out of him this year. Aside from that, you're going to need some depth. Now, I think there's a couple guys in the draft that I wouldn't be surprised that the Browns take a look at. I would love Michael Hall. I don't think it's going to happen, but he's an absolute freak here in Columbus. But I just think there's a couple different ways the Browns can go with it. Um, in an ideal situation, I would like to sign back Shelby Harris cheap on a 1 year for the purpose you mentioned with the depth. I would like to keep Mo Hurst here for a couple years if you can, just because I think he played at a high level, and I think you can get him cheap, and I think he'd be really good depth for a couple years. I think that makes sense. Um, but yeah, with Jordan Elliott, I think he's going to get a little bit too much. So for what the Browns are going to be willing to do, I think it makes sense to sign one of them for sure, if not both of those guys, and then maybe take a swing at a draft pick, add them to that room. That's what I see happening. But what do you think?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I'm going through right now, looking at over the caps valuations for each of these players, and it's really interesting because so of the three, Shelby Harris has the highest valuation for free agency uh, APY. It's a little over 3.5 mil is what they've got his value at, which I think makes a lot of sense. Mo Hurst, they've got a little over 2.1 mil, which makes sense. Jordan Elliott, they've only got as a hair over 2 million. And that's interesting to me because I'm with you, Derek. Like, I think that Jordan Elliott, people are going to look at the market for D tackles, and I think that they're going to overpay for Jordan. And why do I say that? Well, let's take a look. Interior defensive line. Let's take a look at snaps. The best snaps guys, the like, as far as total snaps percentages, guys that are under 30, right? The only options, so you got Christian Wilkins, who's 29. You've got Justin Jones from the Bears. You've got Justin Matabuke, who got the franchise tag already.
I was just about to
Bilal,
say, not that the Browns would do it, but oh my gosh, would I run outside shirtless and do cartwheels if we got him? Oh my
he's
gosh,
good.
he's so good. He is
Hmm.
so good.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. But other guys, right? So Benito Jones, who I know nothing about. Jonathan Harris, Jonathan Ledbetter, Derek Nadi. But regardless, you see what I'm
Hmm.
saying. These names, like, there's not. Javon Kinlaw. That's interesting. Um, but
Yeah.
when we're looking at younger guys available in the D tackle market in free agency, there's not a ton. And for me, what does that pretty much say? What does it scream? It screams to me that odds are, especially with the cap going up as much as it did, teams that are rebuilding that want a guy that's going to be able to be there for multiple years and at minimum be able to play a role, they're going to get overpaid.
Hmm.
For sure, they're going to get overpaid. I mean, Sebastian Joseph Day, who's a good run blocker, but that's pretty much or run stopper, and that's pretty much it. Uh, he I want to say signed a 3-year, $21 million deal, not this past offseason, but the offseason before that with the Chargers, and he ended up getting cut. Um, but that is like I wouldn't expect Jordan Elliott to get that much money, but at the same token, the cap went up an unbelievable amount this year. Um, which by the way, uh,
Hmm.
people thank Taylor Swift for that. Believe it or not, thank Taylor Swift for it. She brought in a lot of revenue for the NFL, and it translated to this. Say what you will, but
Whatever.
but it's interesting when we talk about the three, and I'm with you, Derek. I think what's most likely is Jordan Elliott leaves. We retain both Mo Hurst, and um, Shelby Harris. I think that makes the most sense. Uh, I wouldn't be mad about it. I'm with you, Derek. I think if we can sign two of those three, it makes a lot of sense because you're gonna have Siaki Ika that you gotta fit in there, and I would feel comfortable being able to slowly incorporate, Siaki Ika into this rotation if we at least had Shelby and Mo. The only thing that I can kind of disagree with you on about what you said, Mo Hurst giving him a multi-year deal. I'm a big Mo Hurst believer. However, he's got a very bad injury history,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that's got to be brought up, unfortunately. And it's it's unfair to him, but it's just something
Which
you got to at least consider and talk about.
you don't have to
So
guarantee. That's my biggest thing. Like if you
yeah,
gave him like okay, let's say 2 years. What'd you say his value was? Like what'd you say, a
on
couple
here
mil?
it was
Yeah.
like 2.2, 2.1.
Okay. So let's say you give him a 2 year, $4.5 million deal, right? Just for example, I'm not saying that's what it would be, but let's just throw that out there. And then you guaranteed like 1.5 mil. Like 100% I would do that, and it would give incentive to him because guess what? That would mean he would have a job for the next 2 years, and he would at least have a million or something guaranteed. So I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah,
I
no, I'm with you.
apologize for looking down at my phone. My girlfriend's friend has massively pissed her off, and she is not happy. So,
Mm,
my bad. Anyway, continue.
I've been there, man. I've been there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's such a it's such a weird predicament because I could see where we end up with any combination of the three and bringing two of them back at least. If we only bring one of them back, it would kind of be a little bit shocking. I expect us to bring at least two of them. But at the same token, like, I mean, you're likely going to be able to find like similar players to give you similar production in free agency, or even in the draft. Like there's good chances at that. So I wouldn't be too worried about it. And again, I'll say it again. Siaki Ika, I am expecting, will get reps this year. He will get legit starter snaps. So, um, will he be the starter? Probably not,
Hmm.
but he will be a key factor in the rotation. I do believe that. So,
Yeah, I agree. I still think, like I said, I still think you probably add one in the draft. Not saying it's going to be high, but even if it's like, so I don't know. We'll talk more about the draft later, but
mhm.
like we have two third round picks, two four. Hold on. Anyway, continue talking. I'll tell you. I'll tell you here in a second. Hold on.
Yeah. Um, so while you're doing that, I'll also preface this conversation with this. We're not going to go through every single one of our expiring free agents. That's just ridiculous. I mean, if you want my thoughts on us losing Jeff Driscoll, um, you know, I'll give you a response like as long as he was on this team. That's my response. So but you know, there are some eye-popping names like Jacob Phillips, Nick Harris, Michael Dunn, um, even like James Prochet, the punt returner, Deron Harmon. Like, there's some names that are interesting, but I mean, let's be honest, guys. Like, they played minimal roles in this team. Sure, they helped us win games. We're appreciative of that, of course. We're not saying that we're not, but it's just like there's not a whole lot to talk about. We only saw them a fraction of the time this year. Um,
Yeah.
did you have pulled up what you wanted
I
to
have,
reference?
yeah, I have it pulled up. So, not saying the Browns will use all these picks because I think it's probably obvious we won't. Browns have 8 picks. We have our second, we have our third, we have two fifth round picks, two sixth round picks, and two seventh round picks. So, odds are they're gonna use the two fifths, two sixths, two sevenths, package something together, and probably move up. If I had to guess, that would be my guess. So, or
Yeah, I'm with
trade
you.
for somebody. Who knows? But
Yeah, for sure.
point being is um, we have plenty of picks. So even if we wanted to take one late, we could. That's my point. But
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on.
Hmm.
So our next, I guess we can lump these two in together. Next two guys that we probably want to talk about. So Sione Takitaki and Anthony Walker. I think we can lump them both in together. Um, Derek, I've been high on both of these players. I know you've had, you know, some appreciation for these two as well. Specifically on Sione Takitaki, before we started recording, you were talking about a report that came out
Yeah.
specifically about him and the Browns wanting to get a deal done with him before free agency started. Why don't you kind of expand on that? Where did that report come from?
So it's from Mary Kay Cabot. Says the team will try to re-sign Taki before he hits free agency. There's mutual interest. So, take that for what you will. Do you want me to just get into it?
Yeah. I'll have you lead the way with Sione
Okay.
Takitaki and Anthony Walker.
Yeah. So for me, between these two, it's two drastically different takes. I think for me with Taki, I'm ready to sign him long term. For me, I'm ready to give him a 3 year deal, 3 to 4 year deal. What that money would be, I don't know. But in terms of the Browns linebacker room, I think, obviously JOK is your guy. Again, blank check. But in terms of the depth and, just playing a starting role in the linebacker room and playing it at a good enough to high level, I think Sione Takitaki's done it. And we've done this with him, over the last couple seasons where it's like, okay, we got to decide on him. We got to decide on him. And guess what? He's played consistent. He's played at a high level. And I think he's continued to improve. And, we got to remember, this was a John Dorsey pick with Sione Takitaki. So, this is a guy that's been here for a minute. He has improved, like I said. I think he has played at a high level. We gave him the 1 year last year. We were both high on that. Well, guess what? He played well this year and was a part of a really good defense. So, for me, I'm ready to give Taki a 3 year deal. Cut the bullshit of giving him 1 year deals. I wouldn't give him crazy money by any means, but whatever you can do, if you can, keep him for the next couple years, few years, whatever. I would do that. 100% I would do that. With Anthony Walker, I like Anthony Walker. I was a big fan of him when we got him. I thought it made a ton of sense. I think he's played really good ball for us. However, I think there comes a certain point in time where it's like, okay, you gotta look at life past a player, and I think that's what we've hit that point with Anthony Walker, where it's like, hey, JOK is gonna be a big, he's your cornerstone at the linebacker position. I personally view Taki as kind of the second piece to that puzzle at the linebacker position. But also, I think the Browns are going to bring in somebody else. I think we're probably going to bring in a veteran linebacker to kind of fill those shoes. And then also, again, back to the draft. I think the Browns possibly, more so likely than not, with their third round pick, if I had to guess, looking at linebacker. Because there are some linebackers in this draft, right? I've done, like, it's ridiculous. I have gone overboard with the draft research this year to the point where I know way too much about a lot of people. Like, I legit, Tristan, I'll send it to you. And I know we disagree on it, but just for context, I'll send it to you at some point. I literally broke down every receiver in this draft, watched all their film, got a bunch of information on all of them. I ranked them. I did a whole little sidebar of like, would they fit the Browns? Is this even an option? Like, I know way too much. But I'm saying, my point being with that is like, with linebacker, I think it's similar. Like, the Browns can grab a guy, similar to almost like, what we did with Taki or Mac Wilson back in the day. Where we can grab a guy, not with one of the high picks. But hey, again, 2 5th-round picks, 2 6th-round picks, and 2 7th-round picks.
Yeah.
Why not trade up and get a linebacker? You know what I mean?
Honestly, like if I'm being honest, I think we're gonna hold on to all of those picks.
You think?
I do. I
Really?
do. I got a gut feeling. Like, I feel like this year, I think AB is gonna draft a lot of like younger guys, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of younger guys that are gonna fill in guys
Hmm.
that are moving on next year. I don't know, man.
Dude,
It's interesting. AB's got a
I
lot of options on the table
I
this
could
offseason.
I could kick the door down right now and talk about receivers, but I'm not going to for the sake of this podcast because we're already at an hour. So
Yeah. Well,
we'll just keep rolling through here. But what do you think? So let me ask you this: A, do you agree? Would you give Taki an actual extension? Would you give him a couple year deal? Do you agree with that? That's the first question. And then B, with Anthony Walker, I know a lot of this fan base loves him, but would you be fine if, we just replaced him?
Yeah. So let me start with that first question. Specifically speaking about Talkie Talkie, I'm all on board with you. This is a player that, in my eyes, has very little flaws to his game. He's a super well-rounded guy. He's a guy that you can throw in like into tough situations, and he might not be perfect in those roles, but he's not a liability. And that's the type of player that I think has a lot of value here. I'm with you. Let's lock him up. Let's give him a 3-year deal, 2 years guaranteed. Um, over the cap has his AAV projection at a little over 4.7 mil. And I think that makes sense. I think if you were to sign him to, say, 3-year deal, uh, let's say 16.5 mil total, with 11 guaranteed, that makes a lot of sense in my
Mm-hmm.
eyes. Doing like 5.5 a year, I think that makes sense for him. If you could negotiate it down to 5, even better. Make it, 3 by 15, 10 guaranteed. But again, we're splitting hairs at that point. Regardless, I think, yeah, you should look to bring him back because he's been a good player for this team, key factor for this team. Um, Another player, as far as Anthony Walker goes, this one's tough for me because a lot of people kind of look at Anthony Walker, and I value highly what Anthony Walker brings to this team off the football field because he's a really good leader. He's a great leader in that locker room. He's a guy that the players trust. And not only that, but when he's on the field, this year he was our green dot before he got hurt. Um, he's a guy that is trusted, and he's a well respected veteran, and he sets a great standard for this team. And I think people don't value enough of the other stuff that he does. And even when he's on the field, like, he's not a liability. Like, he's a good football player.
Mm-hmm.
And so, would I sign him for a long-term extension? I don't know about that. I think it ends up similar to last year where you let him test the market, but if he doesn't get a deal that he likes, you bring him back, and you're happy to bring him back. Um, for me, like, I think there's a little bit more bias towards Sione because he's one of our own picks, and we still view him as the prospect that he was versus Anthony Walker. Kind of brought him in as an older veteran, you know, plugged a hole. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the view that we have of Anthony Walker. When it comes to talent on the field, I don't think that they're drastically far apart from what they bring. I do think Taki Taki's the better player. Um, that's for sure. But I don't think Anthony Walker is a slouch by any means necessary. Um, Plus, not only that, but you want to know something interesting? To highlight this, in my opinion, bias in our fan base, Sione Takitaki and Anthony Walker are the same age.
No shit.
Yes, they are the same age. They are
Really?
both 29 years old.
Really?
Yeah. So, because
Wow.
I always had it in my head, like, yeah,
Yeah.
Anthony Walker's like 30 and Taki Taki's like 27. right? Like that's always
See,
the thought process I have in my head, and that's just not the case.
now I could argue, given injuries, Anthony Walker is like 32, but
Yeah,
that's
he's got
different.
injuries, yeah, for sure. But again, like I think if you bring him back, you're obviously going to give JOK a bigger role.
Hmm.
I think that's very obvious for this next year. And Taki is going to be up there with him. He's going to have a lot of snaps. Um, Anthony Walker as somebody as your third option, like God forbid it doesn't happen, but if JOK were to go down, I could trust that Anthony Walker and Sione Taki would at least be able to give me average linebacker play,
Hmm.
like solid average linebacker play. And plus, they know the defense, so it gives you more of an advantage to bring them back. So, excuse me. So I'm all aboard bringing both of those guys back.
Yeah, I mean, I would too. I think I don't know. For me, with Walker, it's just more so like the injury risk versus the money factor. So, I mean, if I wouldn't like you said, I wouldn't give him a long term deal if you can get him cheap again on a 1 year. Sure. Um, I think he is valuable, and the biggest thing too is they play two different positions. Like they're both linebackers, yes, but Anthony Walker is a middle. He's your guy in the middle. Over Taki, I think Taki could play in the middle, but he's more of an outside. Like he's more of an outside. What?
Oh no, I was just saying,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. So, I mean, same position, but the different, I guess, style. They bring something different. So, is it harder to replace your green dot and your guy in the middle? Sure, but for me, this is not the early 2000s NFL anymore, right? We don't have Ray Lewis out there, as a middle linebacker. But again, like I said, JOK, modern day linebacker with an old school mentality. I think we have that guy, um, but I do think you would be able to have somebody come in if need be, fill that role, and be more than fine. I'm very confident in that.
sure.
But for Taki, he deserves a piece of the pie, right? The pie meaning the cap. I think he does. He's done his work. He's put in the work, played at a high level, and I think he deserves his slice. Not saying it's a big slice, but you get your little slice. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
I think it's time. I think it's
Yeah,
time, and he deserves it.
yeah, yeah. Like those pizza parties that you used to have in elementary school, where you
Hmm.
got the thin little
Yeah,
strip of pizza. That's the slice of pie that that Taki gets.
dude.
Maybe we'll give him two. We'll see if we're feeling generous.
Yeah.
Um, but Anthony Walker, so over the cap has him at a value of a little over 3.2 mil. Would you bring back Anthony Walker for that amount? 3.2 million?
I wouldn't fully guarantee the 3.2, but I mean, if you guarantee like you know, $2 million,
Nah, yeah, that makes sense.
sure.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you.
Because
His
you
cap
can
number,
go ahead, sorry.
so sorry. His cap number this year was 1.2. Um, but he was getting paid a little over 1.7.
Okay.
Yeah. So based off of what I'm looking at least if I'm doing my math right, I don't know. We'll see. Um, yeah, a little over 1.7. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it's interesting.
with the cap increasing, like, hey, so be it. For me, it's not like I said, it's not his play. I like him a lot as a player. He's one of these guys that is he going to do anything special for you? No. But he's going to be consistent. He's going to be good, and you're not going to have to worry about him on the field. But I
I
don't know.
actually apologize. I was mixing in his guaranteed salary on top of his base and prorated. He was only guaranteed 500,000,
Oh
but
wow. Okay.
his cap hit was 1.2 mil. That's what he got paid.
Man, I
Um,
feel bad for him now.
I know, right?
Dude's not getting paid anything. I mean,
Poor
still more
guy.
than 90% of the population, but
Yeah,
still.
yeah, no. But yeah, no, I'm with you there. Any final thoughts on our linebackers before we kind of move on?
I'm good.
All right, so we got two more targets to hit on. Um, and the first one that we're going to talk about is Kareem Hunt.
Hmm.
Now, if we weren't restricted to 53 men on the roster and it was like college and you could bring back 80, I think we
Hmm.
both say yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Bring back Kareem Hunt because he, he's just such a nice guy to have around, and he plays a cool, like a good role for us, and you know what we're getting out of him, right?
Hmm.
But Derek, NFL rosters are at 53 players. Realistically, right? Would you clear out a running back spot for Kareem Hunt next year?
I mean, back to our discussion about Chubb, right? What are we gonna have? Three at max, right? It's gonna be three running backs max, and when you talk about that, are you going to give Kareem Hunt a spot over one of those free agency guys we talked about, or a possible draft pick? You're not. You're not. And in all honesty, it's gonna be. Uh, I'll just say it. I like the way Kareem Hunt plays the running back position more than I like Jerome Ford. But the reality is, Jerome Ford's a young running back who's getting better and plays a certain role for you. So, like, Kareem Hunt's not going to be here. And what sucks and what's really sad, I don't know where he lands. I don't know if he lands
Uh,
anywhere.
I honestly, like, I'll give you my opinion on the running back room. I agree with you. I just think that Kareem, like, if we can only put you in like less than 3 yard situations,
Hmm.
you're less of a true option at running back and more so. Oh, I don't want to say that. That's rude.
Situational.
Yeah, like you don't bring enough, and it's sad because I just think with Kareem, his body is just
Yeah.
not letting him. Clearly the heart's there. Clearly the determination is there. He's a good football player. Um, it's just with running backs, the clock quickly strikes zero. We were just talking about it earlier. Um, it's sad, but I think that's the unfortunate reality of where we're at. I
Hmm.
think that Kareem Hunt could potentially even be on this practice squad for us this next year.
Yeah.
Like, and I would like that. I would like Kareem to be still in the building. Um, but I'm with you. There's no way that this team's going to give up on Jerome Ford. Even though this year as a starter, he was inconsistent to say the least. Um, he showed flashes, and he's also young and he's developing, promising. He's quick. Like there's a lot to work with when it comes to Jerome Ford. And I think Jerome Ford as the third option at back makes a lot of sense for us next year. Um, a lot more than it would make for Kareem Hunt. Um, and it's sad, but again, it's the NFL. It's a business,
Hmm.
unfortunately. Um, yeah, it's just tough. It's so sad
It
because it's like
sucks.
I wish like there if you could like wind back the clock on any guy on this roster,
Yep.
most of the players,
Yep.
or most of the people in Cleveland would probably say him,
Hmm.
right? Like, like make this guy 26 again. You know,
Hmm.
give him another 3 years. Like, because that
Dude.
duo when him and Chubb were at their peak, man.
Well, forget
Oh,
that. Could you imagine if the Browns drafted Kareem Hunt
oh,
and we got like prime Kareem? Like, dude,
yeah,
I don't know. He's one of these players that like I will forever appreciate, and I will have nothing bad to say about him as far as like a Brown.
hmm,
Um, but it's a reality. And Jerome Ford, I feel like maybe I've sounded a little bit disrespectful to him. He's a great player. Like he brings a valuable skill set. He's like you said, he's getting better. Um, and you gotta remember, like dude was a stud in college. Like he was an elite prospect who got picked late. Um, and I think he gives you a lot. If I had a chance to like speak to the Browns or give my 2 cents on Jerome Ford, what I would say is get some more size on him and teach him vision, and he can be a great running back. I think he's
for
just a
sure.
little too slim, and I think he lacks the Nick Chubb factor of seeing things before they happen. Um, how Chubb does what he does, I don't know. But point being, at the end of the day, will Kareem Hunt be here? No. Is it sad? Yes. Is it unfortunate? Yes. But again, it's the reality. So that's all I have on that.
Mhm.
You got anything else?
Just adding on to Jerome Ford, like I'd even argue, like I don't even necessarily think he needs to like be bulker. I think a lot of his issues, you already said it, is vision. If he could hit the hole with more confidence and identify where and when he needs to hit the hole, like I think that alone makes him a really good back in the league. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't think he's that far off from being a good starting caliber running back in the league. You know, he's just got to develop mentally, and you know, like you said, he was a highly touted prospect. Like people forget, he was at Bama.
Mm-hmm.
He was an Alabama running back. Had to transfer to Cincinnati because it's Bama. Like a lot of players just cannot get on the field.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. I mean, hell, they had to push Jalen Hurts out because Tua was
Mm-hmm.
just too talented, you know. And both of them are starting caliber quarterbacks in the NFL now. It's you know, it, it's just the nature of Bama. So, um, I don't know. I'm interested to see where we go with this running back room. I would love to bring Cream Hunt back, but on the practice squad.
Yeah.
So, um, moving on. Unless you had any last thoughts, but